It's shortly after sunrise on the Jaffna Peninsula in northern Sri Lanka, and Anthony Pillai Tarshan is returning after several hours at sea. His life has changed drastically since 2013, when in the aftermath of Sri Lanka's civil war, he spent 21 days on board an asylum seeker boat before ending up in immigration detention in Australia.
Christmas Island இருந்தோம். அதில் ஒரு 15 நாள் இருந்தோம். அதுக்கு பிறகு டார்வினில் இருந்தோம். அதுக்கு பிறகு குயின்ஸ்லாண்டில் போய் இருந்தோம். அதுக்கு பிறகு அப்படியே மலையாள வந்தோம்.
Placed in community detention, Anthony Pillai says he spent a year working at an abattoir in regional New South Wales. But the Australian government ruled it was safe for him to return to Sri Lanka, and his request for protection was rejected. Like many others in his situation, Anthony Pillai doesn't want to talk about why he left Sri Lanka. Fear of harassment by security forces is still widespread among Tamils, a decade since the end of Sri Lanka's civil war. Here in northern Sri Lanka, it isn't difficult to find asylum seekers who tried to come to Australia. Among those sent back, there's mixed stories about how they've gone resettling into the communities they tried to flee. These young men say few people nowadays would risk getting on board a boat to come to Australia.
Sri Lanka Navy எங்களை கைது பண்ணாலோ அதால் நடக்கிற விளைவுகள் நிறையப்பா அது எங்களால் தாங்க இல்லாது.
When this family of 4 was sent back from Australia in 2014, they spent their first night in Sri Lanka in custody and say they've had to appear before a court every 6 months ever since. Last month, Sri Lanka's former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, a man accused of war crimes, was elected the country's new president. But the Australian government says it will not change its policy of returning Tamil asylum seekers back to Sri Lanka. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Department of Home Affairs said, "We cooperate closely with the Sri Lankan government to return people who have been intercepted trying to reach Australia illegally. People who have no lawful basis to remain in Australia are expected to return home." Subramania Mahendran fled a refugee camp in Sri Lanka in 2013 and spent 2 years living in regional New South Wales awaiting the results of his refugee application. It was rejected and he was told to leave Australia. While dreams of a new life in Australia once provided hope, for a growing number here, the reality of trying to come to Australia is something they would much sooner forget. In Jaffna, Aaron Fernandez for SBS World News.